Welcome to the Soccer Geeks podcast, hosted by Jason Barbado.
Welcome back to the Soccer Geeks podcast. I am Marissa Callie, and I'm joined by the host of Soccer Geeks podcast, Jason Barbado. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Marisa. How are you today?
You were practicing that a lot.
I really was, yeah. My rolling R's. Here we go. Marissa, I'm very, very, very excited to host this episode today. Today, we're going to talk about impossible on the show. We're going to talk about unlikely, and we're going to go down that path of unlikely probability. We're going to be talking to American soccer's poster child for inspiration, the infamously famous Jimmy Conrad, a.k.a. Conradinho. Why don't you welcome Jimmy on the show, Marissa?
We need some background music. I'm going to add
Hey, buddy. Yeah, dude. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, lots of sound effects on that one. Jimmy, welcome to the show, buddy. So happy to talk with you today. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Jason. I am a soccer geek myself, so it's an honor to be here.
Oh, buddy. Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun. I know it's going to be great for our listeners. Marissa, thanks so much for putting this all together.
Yes, thank you, Marissa. Appreciate you.
Yes, thank
Absolutely.
you. And I will be back later on to give you some insight. So enjoy. Awesome.
Thanks, Marissa. All right, Jimmy, man, I want to jump right into it. First of all, I love for those of you that are listening, Jimmy is wearing the Bob Marley inspired Ajax kit, but he looks like he's about ready to host a rave as well, which I'm pretty excited about it.
Jimmy, I can't confirm or deny this rumor at this time.
Buddy, let's go. I'm sure you've got some real good
I got some
bites.
whistles and some glow sticks, but that doesn't mean anything, okay?
That's just sideline behavior for you.
Sideline behavior.
Jimmy, the more I've studied your career, the more I've been a fan of just following you in all the different streams that you are, the more I'm just increasingly impressed with just your career. And I'm not just saying that just to start the show, just to get you kind of relaxed. This isn't like your dose of wine to like loosen you up in the show, but genuinely, you've had one of the most amazing careers in U.S. soccer. I mean, to be quite honest, it really reads like a Hollywood script, a feel-good story. And what I really want to be able to do today is bring that level of honesty and grit, and self-belief and determination for our listeners. It's one of the things that I appreciate so much about you is just your uncanny way to adapt and to learn and to work yourself into success. And that's not a knock on like the talent that you have, but there's always a ceiling to everybody's talent, and then it's what you kind of do with it. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be able to kind of help you share a little bit of the Conrad family recipe to getting your butt out of bed every day and just kicking tail everywhere you go. Does that sound like a plan?
Well, I want to say that as time has passed and now I have a lot more time to reflect on my career and the things that I accomplished, I think that, and I'm coaching more now, especially in the youth sector. I'm like the super volunteer dad in little rec leagues or in the local high school, whatever. But that I've learned that my talent was commitment. Yeah, that was my talent. So I obviously could do the basic things that you needed to have success at the highest levels, like trap a ball and make a good pass.
Yeah,
but I wasn't going to break the lines, be a number 10, pull the strings. I had that in my bag, but I didn't have necessarily the confidence to do that consistently. So I was better, at least in terms of my mindset, I was better molded to play center back and to be an organizer, communicator, putting people in good spots, putting out fires before they start, that type of stuff. I love team shape. I can talk about team shape all day, every day. I think that solves 90% of your team's problems if you have good starting positions, because if you're on the defensive side of the ball and you win it, you know where everybody's standing, and it should help you transition into the attack. And we don't talk about those little things enough. Yeah. I think that's getting lost in the era of YouTube, where you're just watching highlight videos of Ronaldinho doing tricks, and that guy's amazing. I love that dude. But there's also so many other elements to the game, and also different ways to have success. You don't necessarily have to do juggles or keepy uppies for 1,000, although it would help, but it helps build that base. But that doesn't have to be your main driver of how you can have success in this game. And so to your point, I actually appreciated your description of, I figured out a way to adapt and then turn that into a pretty successful career, especially given where I came from and given the talent at my disposal.
Sure. I mean, well, that's the thing too. I mean, you could have, like you said, about keepy uppies and juggles and all these things. I mean, that makes for a great, street performer down the road, but it doesn't necessarily translate to being successful on the field. It can help, but again, like you said, it's a tool in the bag. And if the tool in the bag is not being able to read the game or to know enough about what you're reading when you read it, how to react and
Mm-hmm.
respond, accordingly. All you have is tricks.
Right.
And that can only take you so far. Take us back a little bit in the what we can call, your very storied career. You kind of grew up in the suburbs of LA, not too far from where I was born. I was born in South Pass at Huntington Memorial.
Oh,
so,
wow. Really close. Yeah.
So pretty close. But you played high school soccer, you lettered, according to Wikipedia, right? You lettered all 4 years, which is a pretty big deal. So, did you play club back then? I mean, club really wasn't too big of a thing, or travel back then. It was pretty much AYSO, I imagine, correct?
It was AYSO. Shout out to Region 98. That's where I got my start. And I played AYSO from age 5 to about age 11. And what happened was we had a pretty good all-star team. And around this time, which 11, that'd be like 1988. It makes me feel really old. But around the late 80s, our all-star team was winning Southern sectionals. Like we won everything we could win in our age group at that age. And we had a dad who was our coach, but his son played soccer at Cal State Northridge. And so he would come back and help train the team when he could. And his dad would coach on the weekends. But we knew, even at a young age, that we were getting exposed to something a little bit different than the volunteer dad. And it got to the point where this guy was looking for some extra income, and club was starting to form in a meaningful way. And he said, we should take this team and turn it into a club team. And at that point I was playing baseball, and I was, doing some basketball stuff. I was never really interested in gridiron per se, American football, but I mean, I did like playing with, flag football, whatever, but nothing, hitting somebody like that. That was that level of alpha male testosterone. Even though I have some of it, never really scaled those heights. But he said at age 11, you need to focus on one sport. And our parents were pissed. They were pissed that this guy's coming in, Mr. Swashbuckling college kid who thinks he knows everything about the game. And for me, it was really easy. I didn't find baseball to be consistently engaging. Obviously, the moments where you're on the base path, or if you're up to bat, or you're at first, or you're the catcher. Like if you're involved in every play, sure, the game's okay. But if you're not, it's hard. It's hard. So it was a really easy decision for me. And my parents were like, all right, well, I guess he's going to do that. And I was eager to join the team because of the creativity that can exist within the game. And I thankfully had this coach who fostered that. He didn't try to tamp it down. He didn't try to force us to play a certain system. He in a really strange way, I got exposed to a coach who had an idea of how the game should be played, but then understood what the talents of each of his players had and tried to work the system around that. And I think sometimes we see a lot of, and I see it with some of the youth coaches, this is the way they're going to play, and this is it, and I need you to do this. But you're now asking a kid who might not have the skill set to do that. So what immediately happens is that kid feels bad about themselves. The coach doesn't look at the kid the same way. And coach never gives that kid a chance to adapt potentially to the system. And there's not even a middle ground. There's no compromise. And so that gets a little frustrating. So ultimately, as I've learned on this adventure, and you can take this any different direction you want, but we have more than enough kids that want to play. I still feel like our coaching needs to continue to mature and evolve. And it's not due to an enthusiasm or willingness. There are plenty of experienced dads who have coaching experience in other sports who come in, and those are all, the kids still learn from that as well. But there's some subtleties and nuances that I think some of the coaches from other sports can't apply to this particular game. And, that gets a little frustrating when you see some of that going on. And so I'm trying to do my part to give back where I can, but also the refereeing needs to evolve, and I think that the parents do referees a disservice. Like, you kill the spirit of potential people that are volunteering their time or getting $10 an hour or whatever to run the half sideline, which is hard in itself, right? There's so much pressure. And then you got parents right behind you telling you suck. You don't know what you're doing. You're like, why am I going to be out here? But all of that is going to elevate the experience, because if our games are well reffed and our players are starting to get better, our coaches are getting better, all boats are going to rise here. And so, the reffing thing is interesting because I wasn't the nicest to referees, but
I'm sure.
but my only issue with referees was their inconsistency in their calls. Like, you can't call that a foul, and the same thing happens to me, and you're like, play on, like, no, it's not a play on, dude. You set a precedent. I want you to maintain that precedent. But that was where my biggest issues were with referees. I understand they're humans. I never really got on them about missed calls, like missed offside call. Like, that happens. They're humans too.
Well, you'll appreciate this. My middle daughter, my oldest, who plays soccer, is now 13, and she's really wanted to referee for like the last year. Just as, I mean, it's better than babysitting money, to be quite honest. You go do a tournament in the weekend, she can do really well. Right. And so one of the things, to bond with her over it, and you'll appreciate this, but I'm going to go with her too and kind of take my grassroots refereeing as well. And so it's going to be I cannot wait to be on the sidelines and have a parent like screaming in my ear about stuff. It's just going to be absolutely hilarious.
I love that you're doing that. And I think it's important. There should be some type of rule put in place that if your kid signs up, let's say at the under 5, whatever, the youngest levels where there's no pressure, there should be no emphasis on winning. It's only about development.
Yeah.
But there's still referees out there. Every parent should have to ref at least one game.
Yeah.
They have to know what that feels like, to be in the middle, to be in control. And I don't think parents really understand how important a referee is to the rhythm and flow of a game, and how much they do control the atmosphere of what's happening and what's allowed and what's not. And I don't think you can understand that unless you're out there yourself once. Yeah. And I also think that for the teams that I help coach, and I work with the San Francisco Glens here, and they have USL League Two status and a really robust academy that's going to be the MLS Next Pro Academy and all that good stuff. But I've tried to put a mandate in place for them that not just our parents, which is outside of that our kids need to be referees. They need to have a 360 view of what it means to understand the pressure of what that role does in their job. And I think that will allow for some more empathy to come in when you're in the heat of the moment going, this guy's doing the best that he can, and maybe he missed that one, but I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm not perfect either. And I think that's a really necessary conversation to have.
Well, one of the things that I think would be really awesome is honestly every kid in the academy, because my kids play academy as well. But every kid over 14 years old should be reffing all the rec leagues. Like at least start at that level. Like at least,
get it.
But they should be, the weekends that they're not playing, or if they're playing on Sunday, they're reffing that on Saturday or whatever it is, at least one game. But giving back to the game, especially at the younger ages, can create such a different perspective for players, and also allows them the opportunity to grow in the way that they see the game. I've talked about with my kids that, like, listen, there's the game on paper. There's the game we see, with our own eyes, and there's the game from the sidelines. And then even there's the game on film. Every one of those perspectives is completely different. Right. But there's also, I don't think we really take into consideration the way that the game is actually perceived through the eyes of the referee. They're human and they're going to make mistakes and all those other things, but it's a whole different can of worms that you start opening in thinking about that. So I'm 1,000% with you. In fact, on the show, and even with that, the app you and I have talked about that we're developing, like there's a huge component for refereeing, but we want to see a greater level of entry for kids that actually have an interest, from a career standpoint in refereeing. Like we need more. There's many.
But why would you do it if you're walking in, if you're 14 and you're getting abused by a bunch of super aggressive parents? You're like, I'm gonna go babysit. That's just like,
well, that's safer. Yeah, it's
probably safer. It's
less
just
liability.
Well, I don't know if it's completely less liability, but you have a knife. Stop away with that knife. But
exactly.
But yeah, it just deters the positive energy that you're talking about that could be surrounding these particular positions, and potentially the kids that are drawn to being a referee, but then get that stamped out of them because of bad behavior.
I just think that the more kids referee, the more parents understand it, and the more parents wouldn't want their kid being screamed at by some guy who, to be fair, and typically when I see it, it's people who aren't like, I'm not making trouble. They're not soccer families. They're other sport dads, that, are just screaming at the referees because that's just what we do. And they're all incompetent, but
they paid their hard-earned money, man. They get to yell whatever they want.
I guess. So, I mean, that's something that I definitely think that needs to be addressed. And I think slowly but surely, we can get there, but guys like you who have a really high profile, I think it's great that you're speaking out about it, because we need to cause and draw more attention to it. Most of the times when my kids play games, my youngest is pre-academy. Next year she'll be academy age. My other daughter is now her first year into it. Most of the times there's not 3 referees. They're playing academy soccer in our country, and there's such a shortage that there's maybe a center referee and 1 AR if they're lucky. That's real tough. That's really that's a tall order, and so there's got to be a lot of.
Here's a fun story for you. My daughter's playing JV at her high school, and they had a game, and the referees didn't show up. They didn't schedule them, whatever. So I'm sitting in the stands, and all the parents look at me like, "You have the most experience, man. Just get down there and make it happen." And I was like, "Oh man!" So I like begrudgingly get down there, and I end up reffing full 90 minutes or 80 minutes for a JV game. But I was by myself, and it was very hard to manage the offside line because I just couldn't be everywhere at once.
Yeah,
and it
you're
was
like
a little one-sided.
Box to box.
Yeah, it's a lot. I definitely, I burned my calories that day.
Yeah,
but I was very thankful that the other coach of the other team was open to me being involved, and it's just JV, not taking it too serious. It was pretty one-sided. My daughter's team was a little bit better than the other, but still, it was difficult to manage that part of the game. Everything else I can see. I let things play out just a little bit to see if there's an advantage, if there was a proper foul. You look at body language and reaction and how everybody else is responding. And these are other things too that I think from a referee perspective, they need to play more, because when you play, you also understand some of the nuances and subtleties of what a foul is and what it isn't, what that would look like, how it feels to be on the receiving end of some of these tackles, or committing these tackles themselves. So that was one of the things I had a chance to talk when I was with the national team. Me, Chris Armas, and Landon Donovan went and spoke to 300 referees that ref professionally in this country. And that was my big thing was, I hope you guys are playing, because just as much as we should be out there reffing to get that sense of how it is to manage that role and that responsibility, they should be doing the same. And then there was no pushback on that. I think they all agreed that they should be playing, but I just talked about more transparency and communication. And ultimately, if you have a proper captain on your team, this is at the professional level or college level, I guess, high academy level, then if you just talk to the captain and say, "Hey, listen, it's getting to the point now where I have to hand out yellow cards," and you give kind of that little cushion of letting your captain know, and he can tell the rest of the team, then I think you'd start to manage the game a little bit better. But when the referee makes it about them, then the game changes, of course. Yeah. Oh yeah. Anyway, we don't need to get into referee stuff. Yeah, no, but it's just kind of an example an example of just one area of the game that could benefit the whole.
Yeah. 1,000% with you. After you are done kind of youth and club, like you said, you were kind of at the turn of the chapter, if you will, in American soccer, going from, AYSO to club teams and things like that. You go to San Diego State, which is right down here, which is an awesome school and place to be at. So, but you're there for 2 years, you transfer to UCLA and you win a national championship. And obviously, you can talk about some of the ups and downs, I'm sure in that whole realm. And that's probably an entire show to itself, just about that process of playing college soccer and going from one program to the next and kind of asserting yourself. But winning a national title is pretty dang huge. On top of that, I was wondering, like, the post collegiate career, you went undrafted. So, winning a national title to, crickets.
Yeah. I think what's interesting is to talk about a theme that existed throughout that process. When I came out of high school, I just happened to play in the league with La Cañada High School. And La Cañada at that point was on the cusp of 50 straight wins, being the number one high school in the whole country. So we had that team in our league, and I never won my league in high school. I won almost every other trophy you can win in this country: youth national championships, college national championships, MLS Cup, Open Cup, Gold Cup. I played a Copa America World Cup. I've done all these crazy things, but I never won my goddamn high school league championship. It frustrates me. Anyway, so it's when I came out of high school, I did have some interest, but like any player, you're only thinking Division I. And at that point, when I was coming up, there was no MLS, and I would go to UCLA soccer games. So I would go and watch Kobe Jones, Brad Friedel, Joe Max Moore. I would see Ziggy Schmid, the coach, rest in peace, who was larger than life for me. I always wondered, wow, I wonder what it'd be like to play for UCLA and to play for Ziggy. I couldn't get enough of it, which really speaks to going to see games in person.
Yeah.
And we both have daughters. From a female perspective, they need to go to NWSL games. They need, or college games. They need to go see what's possible. You talked about the impossible to start the podcast. The impossible is made possible by seeing somebody else that you can emulate that's done the same. You don't necessarily know their story, but you can start to be like, I wonder what it's like to be that person doing those things. It's a dream.
You have to give them a platform for dreaming. Yeah.
100%. And so I had that, and it was UCLA. That was my dream school. And coming out of high school, I had very solid SATs, like a 3.8 grade point average. I skipped a grade when I was younger, so I felt like I had that going for me. Didn't make any difference that I skipped a grade. I thought, write my essay about this. It's gonna be great. And they're like, dude, we have people that skip like 5 grades. You're not that big of a deal. And I didn't get into UCLA based on academics alone. So I had to get in through sports, and the coach, Todd Saldana, who I'm friends with now, he was the assistant for Ziggy. He's like, yeah, we don't really know who you are. So if you get into school, I'll let you try out. But if you don't, we're going to have to pass. So I was like, all right, this sucks. So thankfully I had the same coach that I talked about in AYSO. I was still, we had gone to a different club, and I joined him, and I started playing a year up, which was actually the age I was competing against because I had skipped a grade. And I wonder if how my life had been different if I hadn't, because then I would have been competing with guys my own age, but whatever, it all worked out. So it was kind of this theme of, nobody really knows who you are. We don't know how good you are, and best of luck. And so I had to go and kind of kick down my own doors. And my club coach ultimately got me that opportunity at San Diego State, and just convinced the coach to give me books scholarship. I was making getting like $300 a semester, but I was telling everybody I had a partial Division I scholarship, of course. and it didn't get resolved until like a couple weeks before the season started. So I get this packet from State, and I'm training I knew early on that it's rare for a coach to cut the fittest guy on the team. And I knew that coaches saw that as someone who cared. And imagine if you were the fittest guy on the team and you could play. And that's kind of how I saw it. If I could prove that I deserved to be on the team just based on my attitude and my desire and my work rate and my work ethic, and then I can also prove that I can play, I'm going to make this team, and there was still no guarantee. I wasn't given that much money. The guy could have cut me for sure. So we had to run a 3 miles. The Cooper's test is what? 2 minutes, or 2 miles in 12 minutes, under 12 minutes. This one was 3 miles under 19 minutes. I beat everybody by over half a lap. I got in at 17:10.
All right.
And I trained at Mount Sac, which has one of the best cross-country courses. And I would go out there 2 or 3 times a week and go run their famous cross-country course where they did all the high school. To have success and to deal with something that maybe wasn't certain, but I was going to make it certain. And so when I went in there and crushed everybody, the older guys are pissed because they think I'm showing them up. And I'm telling you, this rinse and recycle of that feeling happened to me a lot throughout my career. But I proved myself there. And after 2 years, I learned that the coach was not great. I wasn't learning anything. I wasn't learning from him. There was no system. It was just kind of like roll the ball out and go play. And I felt like I needed more. And after there was 10 freshmen that came in, and I'm giving you this story because there's some context here, but eight of us 10 freshmen left after 2 years. We kind of talked ourselves into a frenzy. We're a very, very close-knit group, but I was the only one that was swinging to go to a bigger Division I school. I think another one of my roommates went to Fresno State, but I went to UCLA. But I had to cold call Ziggy Schmid. And I got the same thing as I did when I was coming out of high school. Yeah, we don't really know who you are, man. Right. And so what I did was I drove up to UCLA, and I kind of had like a little goatee. I thought it was so cool, a little goatee, and had all whatever the local or that time's trend.
Sure.
And I cleaned myself up. I didn't want to have any bias. I didn't want there to be used anything against me. I wore like a polo. I tucked it into some khakis,
Sure.
And I just went in, and I went into the UCLA soccer offices, and I went in to introduce myself. And the secretary, whoever at the front, just said, hey, you got to wait, because obviously I was unexpected. And I waited an hour and a half, and I just sat there. And there's no cell phones. So it's not like I'm looking at anything. I'm just sitting there. And UCLA's campus is beautiful. And I'm like, man, this place is great. And waiting and waiting and waiting. All right, Ziggy, we'll see you. I knew he had been up there forever. And I go up there, and he And this is at the time where he wasn't really sold on me yet. But we've had one phone conversation, and I just wanted him to see my size, to meet me in person, look me in the eyes, and I think it helped. It was a bit of a risk.
Sure.
And he said, we have some recruits that we're looking at, and if something doesn't happen with them, then maybe you have an opportunity. And I said, okay, great. Thank you. Nice to meet you. Good luck, whatever. And so I left. And what ended up happening, Danny Califf, who ended up was in Southern California as well. He left to go to Maryland. And so he was a big center back like me. And so Ziggy's like, hey, if you want to come, we'll give you 1 week to try out. I'll get you into school. I'll give you 1 week to try out. And I'm like, all right. At this point, my scholarship at San Diego State had increased. My parents are like, what are you doing? You know how expensive UCLA is, you psycho? Sure. So I'm like, no, I got to do it. It's my dream. This is the school I went to go watch games at when I was a kid. I got to see it out. And I told myself if I didn't make it that first week, that I would consider it a redshirt year. I would work my ass off for that year and then try to make the team the following season. Well, I go in, and one of my high school teammates, who is a year younger than me, he's coming now in as a freshman. He's like, hey, we're having physicals for the upcoming season. You should come with me. We'll carpool. And I was like, sweet. Yeah, cool. Wouldn't mind, I don't know, get a physical, go meet the guys, any of the coaches. So I go. This is the most heartbreaking thing of all time, Jason. I go, and I'm sitting by Poly Pavilion, which is right across from where the doctors and physical area is, physical treatment guys, physios. I can't think of their names right now. PTs, physical therapists. Yeah. And it's all set up for UCLA soccer. That was their day to get all this done. And I go, and assistant coach Paul Crumpy, who coaches at LMU now, goes, yeah, you're not on the team. So you can just go home.
Be here.
Yeah, you shouldn't be here. You should just go home. But I didn't drive by myself. I had now had to wait. And since Craig Hart, who my teammate was a freshman, he had to go last. I sat in Poly Pavilion by myself for 3 hours. By myself. No cell phones. I mean, I felt like the biggest lump of coal of all time. I mean, there's other phrases I could use, but I just felt I was trying to work through like feeling sorry for myself, but also like, hey, this is okay. It's part of it. You got to earn respect. You can't, it's not just going to be given to you. They don't know who you are. And man, what a roller coaster of emotion for 3 hours. And it got to the point where Paul Crumpy, to his now he's obviously a very close friend, but
yeah, he's a big fan now.
Yeah, of course. But he felt so bad for me.
Yeah.
That kind of word got out that I was just sitting in there by myself, that I kind of got the sympathy. Okay, I guess you can come in and get a physical. And at that point, I didn't really want one. I was embarrassed, So now you go in there and everybody's looking at you, and you don't want to make eye contact with anybody. Like, you're just getting the sympathy thing. They don't think you're any good. You're just some guy that's trying out. And I know that feeling. And so it was the worst. And I did not enjoy that day, but it in some ways made me want to prove myself even more. So I end up making the team. I'll fast forward through all the other sadness of all of it.
Oh, you're good.
After 1 week, I make it, and I'm the first walk-on to start the first game of the season since Kobe Jones. Now, you'd think my career takes off from there. Look at this guy, ended up in a World Cup. Look at him fight through all that. Listen, Ziggy Schmid was a very difficult coach, and he would give you 3 games. And if you didn't play to the level of his expectations for 3 games, you might not play for 6. You might just sit there and watch. And that was me. And it was really easy for him to do it because he didn't recruit me. I was just some walk-on. There's 27 players on the team. I was number 27 my junior year. And we were the number 1 team in the country. And I sat behind Taj Jenkins, who was an All-American, ended up getting drafted. He's a senior, number 1 by an MLS by Colorado Rapids. So, I mean, I was sitting behind some pretty legit talent, but it was hard. It was hard because I had left, guaranteed minutes, probably being one of the top players for San Diego State. And now I'm suffering at UCLA, even though that's the school I wanted to play for. So I went through all of this, and my senior year, I'm still kind of in and out, and I was hot. I mean, I was doing everything I possibly can to get better at the game. I was training by myself when nobody was watching, and nothing. I just still couldn't win over Ziggy. It's like he promised parents of players he recruited that they were going to play, and he never promised that to my parents. And so he didn't owe me anything, and he didn't. And I think that's one of the rules of all this. Once you understand that nobody owes you anything, man, you can attack life in a much different way. But if you walk around like somebody owes you something, then that is such a distraction, and it holds you back.
Yep.
And I can speak to that in a different story where I
That's the fast lane to failure, right?
Oh man,
Absolutely.
that sense of entitlement is crazy. And I ended up getting it after I got into a World Cup. And if you want to explore that later, we can. But I just to finish this part of the story off, so the guy that was starting in front of me, actually, let me say it like this. It was senior day. I was only one of 5 seniors. This is before the playoffs start. Senior day, I get to start. My family's there. I'm taking photos with my mom and my parents, and it's a nice day. And the other seniors got a lot of minutes throughout the year, and I didn't. And I was the only senior that got subbed out of the game, and I just couldn't understand it. Like we were winning the 5-0. It wasn't even like it wasn't like it was a 1-0. We need to get it to get into the playoffs, and I'm going to go with the guys I trust. We're crushing this team, and I can't remember who it was. And the fact that he took me out was so heartbreaking to me. And I still honestly in some ways don't forgive him for that, because I thought that he should have known that everything that I've given to the program, I've kept my mouth shut and I worked hard and I tried to raise the level of practice. Even I still have an influence in the team, even if all these little things. And he had actually done me dirty the year before where we were beating Cal. I got to say this one too. We were beating Cal in Berkeley for the Pac-10 championship or whatever. We were up 4-0. And I'm the only player that didn't get to play. And there's like 10 minutes left, and we're crushing them. And so I kind of look over at Paul Crumpy, the assistant. This is my junior year, by the way. And Ziggy turns to him. Crumpy says something to Zig, and Zig turns and goes, "Oh, everybody plays on tournament day. You're so happy we're crushing Cal or whatever." And so Crumpy tells me to warm up. I'm running up as fast as I possibly can. And I get over to the thing. We're like 5-6 minutes left in the game. The ball never goes out of bounds. And I sit there on the sideline, and now I have to hide this rejection and embarrassment. My family had driven all the way up. Yeah. And I was just like, if nobody was around, I would have cried. There's no question in my mind I would have cried in that particular moment. But my team just won a huge game. So I have to go support the team. And that was another element where I just couldn't understand why he treated me that way and never thought about, I was always an afterthought. And then when you fast forward to 1 year later for senior day, and I just felt like I'm just not his guy. So the next week we're playing in the playoffs, first round, and the guy that starts in front of me tears his knee 5 minutes in. And I'm like, holy crap, this is crazy. So I go out, he's got no other options. Like he has to trust me at this point. The first time I ever felt trust from Ziggy. And I go out there and we only give up 1 goal in 6 games, and we end up winning the national championship. And those other 4 seniors got drafted, and I didn't. And I had to start all over again. Nobody really knew who I was. Nobody thought I was any good. And I went into Ziggy like, how did I not get like Mike Petke from Southern Connecticut University? Like Mike, I remember seeing Mike Petke going 6th overall, and he plays at Southern Connecticut. Who? I don't even know where that school is. Okay,
it's that East Coast bias, man. It's that East Coast bias.
It was crazy. I was like, Yeah, Mike Petke, I just won a national champion. Were they not watching that game? I had all these feelings, and so Ziggy goes in and he goes, "Hey, I'll let you. I'll hook you up with the Galaxy." And then I got mistreated by the Galaxy, and again, just always an afterthought, and it just was fuel to my fire. So, I'll give you one other story because it ties into that running one really quick, where I came in as the fittest player, but when I went to go train with the Galaxy, I knew that if I was going to make an impression, it had to be in fitness or in these little areas where I could prove myself and demonstrate that I cared and I wanted to be there and I was going to be the best I possibly could. And they separated us in groups, and we had to do kind of like these, 10 seconds of full sprint, 20 seconds of like a stride, 30 seconds jog, fartlek running, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. And so they put all the young players with Danny Pena, who's like the hardest, toughest dude of all time. I actually get like emotional just thinking about this. And all the younger guys I'm still actually intimidated by Danny Pena to this day, but he would just look at you and you're like, I'm not running past this guy. He didn't want to be shown up. He didn't want to put that extra work in, right? He's 30 something at that point. He'd done what he was going to do. And he wasn't going to he didn't want to have to prove himself all over again. That's just where he was in his career. And I understand where he was, but he also had to understand where I was. And so I just took off. I'm like, I'm not going to, what am I going to show here if I'm not just being intimidated by this really scary guy? And I'm just going to take off. And I took off and I crushed my whole group. And all the other older guys were giving DP, Danny Pena, a hard time because you got this young upstart guy, trying to be a show off. And I wasn't trying to be a show off. I was just trying to.
You're trying to show up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Show up. That's
the
best way to say it. And he pulls me aside and
keep it PG.
No. I'm about to get emotional, but he pulls me aside and it crushes me and like, as he's saying it, I just start crying because who is he to tell me, and
right.
And so I'm sorry. From that point forward, he understood and he backed off. So I can't tell you how cool it was to play at a higher level than any of those dudes and to have a better career than those guys because I was working as hard as I did.
Yeah.
I'm going to get some water. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, get her water. I'll bring this quote in real quick while you collect yourself. And thanks for Jimmy. I love you, buddy. It's just, thanks for sharing that. There's that quote, by Alex Ferguson, right? It's a tribute to him is, hard work beats talent when talent won't work hard. And if that's the one thing I think that probably Ferguson changed in a lot of coaches' minds, especially here in the United States, is that talent will only get you so far. And, that's the thing I think about your career. It's not that you weren't talented, Jimmy. It's that you were so much more committed to working harder than the people next to you, that talent, like you said, that hardworking was my talent, that actually took you further than everybody else. And that's just a huge blessing and a gift for you in itself. But to be faced with so much continual adversity that I'm sure that there's times, and I'm sure there's people.
It got easier because you're like, I've done this before.
Sure.
I've seen these people say the same things, that I'll never be good enough. And I could feel it from their body language and the way that they talk about me. And I appreciate that quote from Sir Alex and give me a moment to catch myself.
Yeah.
I think that what I learned very early on was that it was up to me to decide how good I was going to be at anything. And once people start to limit you or try to hold you back or handcuff you, that's where I start to get a little bit more aggressive. Sounds aggressive, but I would start to push back even harder because who are you to tell me what I can and can't be good at? Whether you're Ziggy Schmid, whether you're Danny Pena, whether you're the Scouts, it's up to me to decide. And it's up to me to decide how much I'm willing to take, how much I'm willing to sacrifice to get there, how much pain I'm willing to endure when I'm running up sprint hills by myself when nobody's looking, when I'm going to go work on a tennis ball machine because I saw somebody else do it and I think that was a really good idea. And where I'm going to put all this time and effort. And does it guarantee me? Just because that's the hard part too, is that I work with some young kids where they put that work in and then they think that's going to happen the next day. Right. But I just juggled 100 times and I had a bad first touch the next. It doesn't. It's a process. It's trying to be better than you were the day before. So ultimately, when I'm teaching kids, that is really it's a pebble. You're dropping a pebble into a pail. But at the end of that journey, your pail is going to be full, and it's hard. It's hard for kids in particular to really understand and appreciate that concept because of wanting it now. Now we could say, it's this new generation and social media and their
whatever.
Span.
People are still the same. The culture
the same. They're the same. They're the same. We're on the same page. They're completely the same, but there are more distractions. But for the kids that really get it, they're out there putting the time in. It's just a matter of how patient are they willing to be to see it out, and that's why I outlasted a lot of people because I was willing to see how far I could take it.
Yeah. I wonder too with that. And I mean, Jimmy, listen, like there's a million directions that we can go from this point
I love it. Wherever you want to go.
And you've got a lot of great stories and stuff like that, but let's plant a flag a little bit there and talking about like to youth players, right? Because it's one thing to talk about overcoming adversity, right? Being strong mentally. Like you have to be so well-rounded now where you've got to be good technically, you got to be good tactically, but you also have to be really strong mentally. And it's not so much like, how do you said you won other than, winning the league in high school, you won everywhere else you went. And it's not how we respond when we win things, but it's how do we respond when the doors are closed? How do we respond when no one picks up the phone on draft day? How do we respond when we're watching people that we don't think deserve an opportunity ahead of us get that opportunity and we continue to get the door closed? Like, what is the advice that you can give for again, that level of determination, of perseverance, of self-belief, like I talked about earlier, Jimmy, that it just so much defines who you are. And it's not pride, right? It's not concedence, right? It's just a self level of knowing, like, you don't know how hard I'm willing to work. I don't care how hard anybody else is. I'll give 10% more. Like, can you speak a little bit to those players, to that mentality of how do we craft that in our kids? How do we craft it in players? How do we craft that into and ingrain that in the culture of American soccer?
Yeah, it's tough. I would say the first thing I would say on an individual level is almost reverse engineer where you want to be and then work backwards. So if you see yourself as a professional player, I saw myself as a UCLA player, and I figured out a way to get there. It wasn't a straight line. And I feel like I talk to some kids now that I'm helping try to place in schools, or at least have the coach give them an opportunity, because they've already been accepted, but can they get a real tryout, not just a one-dayer, but like a week or two. And I'm having these conversations, and a lot of them get incredibly crestfallen if it all doesn't go their way immediately. And I think there's some value in what I learned actually through my journey, was that I learned a lot more when it didn't go my way. So when I didn't get drafted, I went down to San Diego Flash, and I guess was, some iteration of now the San Diego Loyal, and, it was planting seeds for the Loyal to exist and the Wave now and all that stuff. But I got to play 30 games in 6 months. And because we were so close to the Mexican border, we got to play against Necaxa and Tijuana. And I got to learn how to be a professional, and I got to learn how to take care of myself without the safety college bubble, or somebody, or a coach or athletic director. It's everybody trying to like help you. There was no help. You just you were sink or swim time.
Yeah. You're not gonna be coddled. Yeah.
No coddling,
no pampering, no coddling. Yeah.
I was sleeping on floors. I'm eating ramen. We're making $800 a month. And you had to decide then if this is really what you wanted to do. And I feel like had I got drafted, then, okay, cool. I would have had that bump of, I made it. I'm in MLS. But I would have sat on the bench and I would have watched, and I never would have got that game experience. Right. We talk about young players leaving here to go to Europe so they can cut their teeth at a higher level and all that stuff. We're talking about Zach Steffen at Man City, right? He's a second, like, he needs games, and getting games are important because you learn how to be better at your craft. And how do you prepare for a game when you're the starter as opposed to being a sub? How do you prepare? Though it's important to learn how to be a sub too, because when things don't go your way, the last thing a coach wants is a player that's going to pout if you're on the bench. Like, they don't want that. So being able to be prepared for all these eventualities ultimately led to me being comfortable and taking things in stride when I did deal with adversity later on. No matter if I was with the national team or not, even with the national team, you get called into the national team. That's just step one. Now you got to prove yourself. Now you got to, okay, how do I make the 18? Okay, cool. How do I start? And you work through all these things. And if you don't have that foundation to fall back on, where you're not, if you're in the national team, you've probably been the golden child for most of your life. But I was one of the rare that I don't think was.
Yeah, you're the anti-hero.
I was the anti-hero in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And so I was really well prepared for my role with the national team. And that was probably a big reason why I got to play and be a part of the 2006 World Cup team. But really, can you reverse engineer it? So I wanted to go to UCLA. I didn't get accepted. How did I get there? And I found a way to make it happen. And had I gone to UCLA, let's even go back to that. Had I gone to UCLA right away, I wouldn't have played. I have All-Americans in front of me. Instead, I go to San Diego State, get 40 Division I games, learn how to play at that level. And when you go to UCLA, you're playing the same teams. You're just wearing a different jersey with players that are probably a little bit better. So all that really was fundamental. So when I talk to my kids, just because, you have a point B that you want to get to, but here's point A. But it's never a straight line. There's ups, there's downs, there's ups and downs. But if your ups and downs are still going towards that point B where you want to get to, then you're onto something. But that means you've made a decision to be willing to know that things aren't going to go your way, and that the hard work that you're putting in, all of it matters. All of it matters. The decisions you make and how you react to adversity, all of it matters. And if you get hurt, how you fight back through that, all the stuff that's leading towards, can I be a better version of me when I'm done? I've learned of players that actually were better when they came back from injury, not just on the physical level, but mentally. They watched
Right.
more games. They became a student of the game. They took advantage of that time to get better at their craft in a different way. So that's what I try to emphasize to my younger players is, okay, if this is where you want to go, now there's plenty of ways to get there. How are you going to do it?
Right.
And if it doesn't work the way that you want, how are you still going to try to get there? And those are the ones that'll break through and ultimately demonstrate the mentality that you're looking for. And honestly, if everybody was as mentally strong as